All right, beautiful people. Today's episode, I love how we call it an episode, as if we're running a show or some sort, but for the internal circle. Um, Obviously, there are many people who have joined our Kaleidoscope group, which I'm very happy about. And the internal group chat, shout out to everyone from there. It's about 124, 25 people in there now. So most of this one will be for the inner circle internal crew who have context of past conversations, but might also be interesting for those just listening in. um Today we're going to talk about magic and its effects, real magic, what real magic is, what are the deceptive elements that exist in the world, what ritualistic magic is, what is the concept of sympathy in space, uh what the hell are plasmoid portals, how does possession um occur and work, and so on and so forth. So these are large topics that I've been asked about to talk about for a little bit. And again, the primary filtration system for any of this information, because we're talking about abstract mystical topics, is your own discernment and your own intuitive sense. If something doesn't resonate or feel off, let it go. But I imagine I will be spilling the beans on quite a few things of what I perceive as truth from my studies and my research and my experiences. And my research and my experience, I consider it to be quite in depth in regards to these matters. And we're going to be, kind of say, going through a few uncomfortable truths when it comes to these subjects, because there are so many illusory elements at work and at play here when it comes to deception, sort of like misleading uh, people from understanding the root basis and the source of what we would call magic. First and utmost, we're just gonna straight go into it. The first thing you have to understand, and I always open conversations about when the word magic is mentioned, with this quote from my book, The Seven Keys. Um, I need to read it properly because I keep forgetting the exact quote. So I'm just gonna try to find it here real quick in my document somewhere. Mm. This is the first key, which we call the key of truth. So if you fundamentally understand this truth, you will understand the basis upon which all forms of formulaic arts and formulaic magic and vision magic in specific, what we're going to be talking about today, is based on. And the key of truth says this: the highest form of the art, as in magic, is belief, as belief supersedes all other sister forms of magic. Believe that there is a higher form of magic above belief itself, and so it will be. For even the exception to this rule is no true exception, because of the rule itself. So, why do we say this? Why is this the first key, the key of truth? Well, you have to understand that whatever you interface with this world is a mental model. And the primary function of the design of our world, in the sense where it is a mental model, uh, uh, that we meet on different scales, such as the macro scale, the micro scale, the human scale, and like the molecular scale or the cosmic scale, right? It is all a mirror world, so to speak. It is a fractal mirror world that functions as a mental model to reflect itself back onto itself, so to speak. So this shows you a very interesting thing about belief as the primary root source of all magic, because belief, what is the effect of belief on the human psyche, on human consciousness? Firstly, you have to understand this. The effect, the immediate effect of forming or having formed a belief on the human consciousness, is that it uh, permanently changes and alters the static default consciousness state of the human mind. When you have formed a belief, whether it be a strong one or a relatively weak one, or when you have formed a belief, um, it alters the lens and the filtration system that you have through which you view the world. So, a very large proponent of magic. right? Both inwards leaning magic and outwards or external ritualistic leaning magic, is for the practitioner and the apprentice to understand a very simple truth. And that simple truth is that everything, everything, theatrical, grandiose, ritualistic, so on and so forth, is done for the purpose of altering the human mental state. Just this information alone will allow you to filter out 95% of lies, illusions, deceit, so on and so forth when it comes to magic. All kinds of magic, whether it be internally directed or externally directed, such as ritualistic magic, all of them, the end result, the final end plan and end goal for all of these ritualistic actions is to somehow alter and change the human mental state, to alter the belief system through which the lens through which life is viewed. Why? Because both the magician and the mystic understand a very important truth about the universe, that the universe is a mental model. And who are those who impress themselves onto these mineral worlds, the mental model? It is those who have the capacity for mental, well, consciousnessing, so to speak, right? If you can interface with the world, you can interface with whatever controls it, with whatever laws and suspensions and so on and so forth exist in the world. So understanding this is very, very important. Um, most of most of mental readjustment occurs not spontaneously, right? So when you're changing your mind or where you're thinking about a thing from a different perspective, you need to have the ability to hold it in your mind. So magic is very closely linked to vision and imagination. Obviously, if you have strong vision and strong imagination, you will be attracted to receiving what I would call, for example, vision dreams. What is a dream? It is your imaginative capacity brought to it brought to its absolute limits to speak to you from a different realm, a realm that's beyond time, in terms of symbolic value and symbolism, right? Why are your dreams the way they are? Well, your dreams form the way they form in a familiar way so that you can create a symbolic or allegoric adaptation or interpretation of what you're seeing in your dream. It's your unconscious or subconscious communicated with you through the language of symbolism. So, uh, what I call elvish, right? The language of dreams is the language of symbols, and your ability to decipher these symbols as within the context of like as they relate to you on a personal and very intimate level. So understand that concept that um, belief forms the ritual. Now let's talk about the two different directors and the third one of said ritual. So, for example, what does a person with a limited belief system, right, who is low on faith, so to speak, how do they achieve change in the external if they are unable to achieve change in the internal? Well, they can impress their influence upon the world and impress their influence upon others through, let's say, deceitful, grandiose ritual. If I were to conduct a ritual that was theatrical in nature, as all rituals are, as only the ones that work. It's why everything is theater in our world, right? And if I conduct a theatrical ritual, the primary end goal of that ritual is always to change the mental state of the people experiencing it. So if I go and say, if I have a concert, right? And if I don't know, in a sense, in a scripted sense, um, we form a belief that during the concert of this specific hip hop R&B artist or whatever, at least three people always die in the crowd. What does that create? That creates an expectation, right? That creates a sort of like a field of belief. And most people who are impressionable and to be able to be impressed upon, they will somehow believe this and the expectation will be created. So it's not even that the person committing the ritualistic act has strong, firm belief that it will work, but no, they are an artist in the sense where they allow others to believe in something they don't believe in themselves because they don't have the capacity to do so. Now, in many ways, and this is all semantics, but let's call this the left hand path. This is the left hand path, impressing your will upon others through creating theater and grandiose ritual to make them believe that something dramatic is going on, right? You don't need your own belief system, but you need their innocent, pure belief system to form the manifestation of the mental model of the universe. Again, like I always say, a great movie to understand how the source of these things work. Watch The Wicker Man from 1973, an absolutely amazing movie that tells too much. It tells too much. If you want to understand how external ritual practice works and why one perhaps shouldn't engage in it, watch that movie. Understand that a very large portion of like a 20-25 minutes of that movie was accidentally lost back in the days when they shot it. And they didn't want that movie out. Um, Christopher Lee, who plays a very big role in that movie and who is also an astute, um, how to say, connoisseur of magic and the occult, but a very decent and great man. From how I experienced him through some interviews I watched. He tells a story of how a large portion of that movie was accidentally lost because it showcases a little bit too much that they would like the average person to know, of course. But even in its current form, without the lost content, it is an astonishing and astounding study and a very good example of how ritualistic magic works because um, to understand the involuntary participant is so difficult for people to wrap their minds around, especially those who are not yet initiated into the truth of the world, so to speak, or like what it is. Um, Becoming an an involuntary participant of a ritual is the fact that you observe the ritual and you believe that something is happening. You believe that something's going to come out of it. Now, if I put you into a dark room with men in with daggers and cloaks, right, and they bring out in this very grandiose, ritualistic sense some sort of a golden idol, right, in the room, and they sacrifice a bunch of animals or even people to these idols. It would be very hard for the average person, for the average mind, to comprehend that none of this has an actual effect unless they believe that it does. Like the people doing it, their beliefs are detached from source, so they cannot manifest, they cannot create. That is why the sacrifice is needed. That is why the person becoming the primary subject of interest in the ritual required, because it is that person who the thing is happening to or who becomes an observer of something that's going on, right? um, that the ritual is effective at because they form such a strong belief that their death is meaningful in some dark sense, that it becomes real. It's like the Alex Jones sneaking into whatever ritual says he sneaked into, because that's one way of making you an observer of a ritual, right? Again, remember, those who are unholy, they're called unholy because they're detached from the source. They don't actually believe these things, but they have to create the illusion that they do. You have to believe these things. That is the greatest deception of our era and our age. And understanding that takes sometimes decades for some people, decades of study of the esoteric and the mystical and the occult. Most people are confused when they deal with magic because they don't understand what magic is, because they don't understand the laws and formations of the universe and the cosmic mind. They will tell you, they will quote the Kybalion or something like that for you, where they'll say the universe is mental, but they don't really understand, they don't really grasp what that means, that the universe is mental. So when we're talking about ritualistic magic, firstly you have to understand that the primary subject and object of interest is the person observing it, because it is their force of belief, which is pure and innocent, that actually creates the intended effect and the intended manifestation. That is why the ritual is always theatrical. That is why it is grandiose. That is why there are hints. I'll give you another example of a ritual. Do you know that there are many movies that are made in Hollywood, for example, that perhaps, okay, I'm going to say it this way. Okay, I'm going to say it this way because it's a theory. Let's pretend it's a theory. Now, if I had a strong understanding of ritualistic magic and symbolic, theatrical, grandiose magic making, what I would do is I would slowly climb the ranks of the Hollywood elite, and I would perhaps make a film or a movie. And that film or a movie would have a different type of story. So, like, for example, let's take what's that called? Eyes Wide Shut, or any sort of like these very sort of like intimate, interesting, mystical sort of like movies. And what I would do is I would make two cuts. So the first cut of the movie would be the full film, and the full film would never go out for public consumption. It would never go out on the public eye. And the full film would be just an extension of the scenes, giving more context to the full meaning of the movie, um, as they are. That would be movie one. And then what I would do is I would create a cut version, and let's say a non-director's cut version of the movie, where I cut out the parts, right? Where I cut out the what I deem the important parts or the darker parts or so on and so forth, and I would take the lesser version of the movie out for public consumption. And guess what effect happens then, right? Because the public becomes an involuntary observer of the grandiose ritualistic manner the movie was shot in, and they will have a less informed vantage point in relation to that movie, but they will enjoy that movie. They will feed energy to that movie. You understand what I'm saying? And they will talk about that movie, and they will popularize the movie. It'll become a hit, so to speak, right? But then they also, some people who are sensitive to these things, they will also watch the movie and they will get some sort of intuitive um, awkwardness, or some sort of intuitive push, like away from seeing it, because they understand that somewhere between those lines, right? Like there's a scene in Eyes Wide Shut, which is a great exemplary scene in this movie of how this ritualistic magic is done. um what's the guy's name? The I forgot the guy who plays the Scientology guy. Oh my God, I'm terrible with names. I'm sorry. Anyway, the main character is at this party, and it's at the beginning stage of the movie where he is met with two attractive women. Right, he's there with his wife, and the two attractive women want to take him somewhere. And he asks them, "Where are you taking me?" And the women tell him, "At the end of the rainbow." Right? Now that's a symbolic portal key, right? If you understand, symbology and so on and so forth, you understand very well where they are taking him. But then it so happens in the movie that the character becomes interrupted, and they're the host of the party, their doctor friend, whoever it is, they need his attention because one of the hookers he was with overdosed on some sort of drug or something like that. And then basically he departs this scene and goes up to see the doctor, and what happens there. But what if I told you that if I were a strong practitioner of ritualistic magic, and and I wanted involuntary participators, I would have made a very similar cut of that movie, and I would create this effect where the main character comes back and finds these two women again, and they go to where they were planning to go, which you and I are not initiated into. You and I don't know where they went, but those who have the full film would know, and that would create a feeling of control and elite superiority. With If I'm a person who has seen the full cut of the movie, and you are someone who has not seen the full cut of the movie, you have not seen through the idea of the movie and the grander context, yet we both celebrate the movie as something positive and something interesting and intriguing. when I know it's dark truths and you don't know it's dark truths, that is involuntary participation. And that is one of the stronger roots of ritualistic magic. So understanding that, understanding that tells you a very important thing about how to disarm uh, ritualistic forms of magic. And how you disarm them is by starving them out of attention, starving them of attention. Um, Now, why is it so? For example, in the Harry Potter books and the Harry Potter movies, that it's not um, good to say the name of your darkest nemesis, right? The name of Voldemort, like right, they whisper it in hushed tones, right? Well, well, primarily how it's explained to us as the viewer, for example, is that their name cannot be mentioned because it strikes fear in the hearts of others. No, but in truth, why that effect is required is because by mentioning the name and speaking about these things, it brings to mind, it brings to people's consciousness all of the dark things and the fear that is associated with the persona. You understand what I'm saying? So remember what we said. It's all about shifting the qualities and the default state of the mind, of the mental state, shifting the mental state. Knowing this, right? Let's move on to other forms of magic. So let's say vision magic. Now, what is the primary difference between something that occurs, a magical ritual, for example, a formulaic magical ritual that occurs in the real world, in the material plane? Well, the primary effect of the material plane is that anything that exists in the material plane is given validity and realism, right? So anything that exists is given validity to exist just by the fact that it is. So, for example, if you had a ridiculous idea, and if you spoke about this ridiculous idea to 15 of your friends, and all 15 of them said it was a stupid idea, and let's say your ridiculous idea is to open up a shop or a supermarket or a grocery store that sells only carrots, right? It's just carrots. Like all you sell is carrots. And then we say, well, that's a ridiculous idea. What a stupid idea. What a dumb idea, right? Why would you only sell carrots? But then if you actually go out and did it, so you spent your money, your resources, your time, your effort, and actually opened up a grocery store that only sells carrots, what would happen? Would they still think it's a ridiculous idea? Yes, but far less. Why? Because it has been manifested into the material realm. So because you've made it exist in the material realm, a a conscious or sentient shadow phantom version of that thing must exist now in the higher planes. So it is a input output type of effect. So of course, when you are unable to impress your beliefs and unable to impress your visions and manifestations in within the realm of thought forms, how you do is you try to reverse engineer it in the material in the real world, which is far more costly. By the way, it takes a lot of time and effort and resource and so on and so forth. This is why I say that the final lesson of magic and the final lesson of formulaic magic is that magic is not necessary. It is not essential. And that's why it's not essential, because it is a lesser art form. It is what I call a sister form of the real thing, right? So the things that happen in the material realm, they're far easier to believe because they already exist. So they're grounded in reality. They have formed into this density. And then when we talk about higher realms of magic or when we talk about vision magic, you must understand that there are things that you can imagine into being. And the degree of one's consciousness and one's ability to do actual magic is the limitation and threshold of their ability to consciously imagine and hold imagery in their minds. This is why, with those who followed me for a while, I've shared the meditative technique where you meditate on imagining and holding within your mind the image of something that is the most beautiful thing you can imagine. right? Because one, this trains your imagination, and two, it invites you into higher realms of thought, and it invites you into higher realms of being. The capacity of your mind, which you will observe as you try to imagine the most beautiful form, the most beautiful thing that you can possibly imagine, you will show you what your limitations are in that regard. Is it something that brings you to absolute tears? Then you are out there in depth, so to speak. Is it something that just makes you feel good? Is it something that makes you feel cozy or comfy? Then you are a modest practitioner. All of these levels, all of these depths to this meditative technique are very important. Now, we measure the capacity of someone's ability, psychic ability, by the quality and depth of their imaginative function, right? Because when you imagine a thing into being, when you envision something, right? You envision it's not that you impress that image onto the world and manifest it into the world, but you envision the changing and the readjustment of your own mental state through doing so. The final effect, the after effect of a strong imagination is a shift in emotional, mental state and tone. So, those with a rich imagination are able to impress strong emotions and strong thought forms onto themselves, and through which they will achieve internal change. Through this effect, through this process, through this inwards ritual, for example, they will achieve a shift in their consciousness, not a temporary shift in their consciousness, so to speak, something that's akin to a placebo effect, which is temporary, but achieve a grander change, a macro scale change, with which they are able to change who they are or who they perceive themselves to be. So there are two objects of fascination in the world when it comes to magic and in relation to magic. One is the self, and the self is the tree of life or the magician's cane or the magician's staff. It is the wand you weave into this world, and you can endlessly transmute and readjust the self through this effect that we just uncovered. And then there is the other. There is the other who is also vulnerable and exposed to being impressed upon because they live in a consensus material reality type of world. So if I open up a grocery store that only sells carrots, like we said, what is the effect this store has on everyone else who experiences it, who merely observes it? They are forced to accept. So acceptance is forced in our world, in the material realm. Acceptance is something that is by default enforced. Now, after accepting it exists, then humans are given a choice through attention, right? To pay attention to this thing that they have accepted into reality because it exists in the collective mind, to give it more attention, to feed it more power, to feed it less power. And then comes the idea of temptation and convincing someone, conviction, where now, because I've created a grocery store that only sells carrots, now I'm going to do branding and marketing and promo material because I want to convince others that this is worth giving attention to. Give me your magic, give me your attention, give me your vision. And that is what's happening on a grander scale. Now there are depths to this, of course, dark depths to this, because the the end result of external formulaic forms of magic are always dark and they require great sacrifice because the people who engage in these arts are removed from their inner vision and they need external proof that they need something that is external and so intense, so pumped of extreme, intense experiences that even those who do not believe will fall under its power, will fall under the thrall of these ritual forms and behaviors and mannerisms. So, if you wanted to explain the secret of all secrets and secret of all secret societies that existed in the history of mankind, you can explain it with this knowledge, which serves as a key to understanding why it is even necessary. A lot of people say, well, they have to tell you and they have to show you. I don't have to tell you or show you anything. You participating are the primary source of manifesting my intended goal. It's not that you are some afterthought or a side quest. You are the object of fascination in relation to my ritual. Because if I don't have the power to form thought forms into reality, to manifest change within myself, then I have to convince you that I have manifest change within themselves. Because if you believe it, then I will have an easier time accepting it. Belief and acceptance, as we talk about. So, the primary differentiator between left-handed magic or left-hand magic or right-hand magic. Again, these are semantics. People use these interchangeably. And I will tell you right now, 99% of people who are into this thing do not even understand the basic fundament of what forms ritualistic magic or not ritualistic magic. They don't understand. They think they understand it because they achieve some sort of mediocre effect from whatever they try to do. And it always leads them down a very dark and brutal path in life, one of self destruction and self deprogramming, and schizophrenia often, and rejection of reality because they don't understand what is the meaning behind the idea that the universe is a mental model. Again, they might have read many manuscripts, many documents, many books, but it's one thing to know something, and it's another thing to understand it, to really like blood and bone, live and breathe it, so to speak. So most people who engage with any sort of mysticism don't really understand it because they're not ready to understand it. And the idea for them to accept this idea for them is a source of pain. It's a source of great pain for them to confess to themselves that their consciousness has not yet reached the level of understanding to be able to form a coherent idea of what this world is and why the achieved effects that they get from whatever they choose to do occur in the first place. So even they are under the illusion, right? Because when your primary goal and your end goal is to create some sort of formulaic or ritualistic, procession in the material plane, so that even you can be lied to by it about its effects, right? It means that you want to create something that's so extreme that is extreme beyond you. So it reaches points of extremities, such extremities that even you forget that you are by definition a non-believer and that you hold absolutely no faith in it occurring, right? So you need the physical and material proof. This is the magic of fortune and luck, right? Who are those who believe in luck and fortune, right? It is those who are removed from the context of the meaning of life. It is those who are removed from the idea, who have forsaken the idea that all things in life occur through divine fate weaving, right? It is those who believe in fortune and luck who are ignorant of the meaningfulness of everything and the ultimate meaningfulness of whatever they do and whatever occurs in their life as a spiritual lesson. So the lowest and the most basest of gods is fortune and luck, because understanding and experiencing fortune or misfortune and luck or unluck is the experience of someone who has debased themselves to such depths, to such dark depths, that they've forgotten about the meaningfulness of life itself. Life as, again, like we mentioned, a spiritual lesson. So it's very important to know these things because why they're useful is because they help you filter out the real from the unreal. They help you filter out the deceitful from the non deceitful. And most importantly, why you need to pay mind to these lessons is because you are re given context that you are the primary object of fascination when it comes to these ritualistic forms or aspects, these ritualistic, grandiose theatric arts, be it media, social media, any type of media, any type of theater or show. Your participation is the primary fundamental root of power that feeds the reality and the validity in relation to what's real of these occurrences. You can detach yourself from it. You can unattention these things out of reality completely because they only work if you believe it. They only work when you believe it. Um, One of the bigger fights in mixed martial arts, Conor McGregor against Nate Diaz, the first time they fought, they held a press conference. And Conor McGregor is at the height of his career at that point. He is absolutely dominating all of his opponents, scaring them into death. Jose Aldo, who was a reigning undefeated champion for the past 9 years, who Conor McGregor fought against, who was an absolute monster at his peak of athletic performance, an absolute monstrous fighter. Conor McGregor impressed upon him the idea that he stood no chance whatsoever. They had an extensive media tour which they both attended, and you could see how Conor McGregor's opponent Jose Aldo was he was literally just tired. He was exhausted of the aggressive disrespect and the aggressive projection of Conor McGregor onto him during this media tour. How that fight ended was that Conor McGregor knocked him out in the first round as he predicted he would. And then Conor McGregor later on in his career would fight Nate Diaz, would who would hand him his first loss after he had reached his peak. And Nate Diaz would choke him out. He would survive his onslaught in the earlier rounds, and then he would go on to choke him out. And in his interview, he would, say an iconic line. He would say, "I'm not surprised, motherfuckers." But before, if you look and study and listen to the media tour of Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor, which I thought was missed by almost everyone who covered it, um, um, Nate Diaz tells Conor McGregor during one of these tours when Conor McGregor says, "I'm gonna knock him out in the first round. I'm this, I'm that. I punch, I hit so hard." Nate Diaz tells him straight up because Nate Diaz he's a tough bastard, and he's mentally very tough, very much like his brother Nick Diaz, who is known for being very mentally tough and for his endurance. But Nate Diaz tells him, "Even you don't believe that. They got knocked out because they were scared because they believed it." And that's exactly when Nate Diaz said that back in the day when that was going on. Uncle Jack was a little bit cheaper. I knew he was going to win 110%. I knew because he had cracked the spell. He had cracked the magic. Everything else was a formality. I knew he was going to win. I took an amount of money that I had and could sort of like put to risk, even though I felt like I was not putting it to risk at that point. And I bet it on Nate Diaz to win, and Nate Diaz won Uncle Jack some good money back then, right? Because he ended up choking Conor McGregor out. I knew it would happen because Nate Diaz, even though he's not, when you listen to him speak, if you know the character and his brother, he's not the sharpest tool in the shed. So he's not that intellectually gifted in the sense. Well, he's a fist fighter. That's what he does for a living. He gets punched in the face for a living. But Nate and Nick Diaz, both the brothers, during their careers, understand something very well. That there's a large proponent of the game that is mental. So if you bitch out, so to speak, right, before the event happens, before the theatrics of the event happens, then you've probably already lost it. And they understand a very simple thing. They never count themselves out. And because they never count themselves out, they cannot possibly participate in reality where Conor McGregor is this incredible one-hit, knockout artist. And as soon as he connects with their face, they will get knocked out. And because Nadias was smart enough to not accept this as tolerated as a reality, right? He came out on top. He got hit. He got dropped early on. But he's like, "No, I don't care." He just came back, took his back, and choked him out in brutal fashion. So the lesson in there, and why we did this sort of like switch up in topics, is that this principle applies to everything and everywhere. And now we approach the concept of sympathy. Well, what is sympathy? Everything that exists in the material world is sympathetic to something. And what something is sympathetic to is decided and decoded from its geometrical and symmetrical form, and then its resonance. And its resonance is defined again by its form and shape, the colors that it exudes, the color that it exudes, and then the projected interpretative elements that are flung onto it by other people, by other observers, right? So when you create something, for example, we talk a lot about my version of magic and making space. So when you build a little dog shelter, a little house for your dog, right? What is that sympathetic to? Well, it's sympathetic to a dog, right? It's sympathetic to an animal being sheltered in there. Will a dog find it and use it as its home? Well, yes, of course it will. Why? Because it registers it as a shelter home for itself because of its inviting nature, because of its geometrical function that it had gained after I had built it. Because I had built it with the intention of it having a geometrical function that would become something akin to a home. So I've created something, right? Right? Jesus was a carpenter. Right? I've created something, my dearest friends, that holds sympathy with my desired effect. Now, is this formulaic ritual? Of course not, because it doesn't involve the belief systems of others. It involves the archetypal design and function of the form that I have given to something. Why does a ship need to be of a specific shape and form to do well on the sea and on the oceans and in rivers and during heavy tides? Because that form is sympathetic to the idea of travel and safety and flow. The circular and oval shapes, they're sympathetic to the idea of flow. Why is my apartment shaped like a square? Well, because it's sympathetic to the idea, the space within it is sympathetic to the idea of containment. Why is your home your spaceship? Why does your energy not leak out from your home? Because it's rectangular and square shaped. It holds within energetic patterns and frequencies that you emit just by existing, and it empowers them in this space, right? Now, if I want to keep something in, I'll put them in a square prison. If I want to keep something out, I'll put it in a square lockbox, right? Because they are not sympathetic to the idea of movement or rolling away, right? If I want to direct an energetic charge in a sharp manner, of course, I will use a triangular or pyramidal piece because it's sharp. And what are sharp things sympathetic to? They're sympathetic to the idea of penetrating through something. They're a penetrative force. So if you want to pierce the veil, you'll build a pyramid because it has penetrative qualities on its sharper ends. If I want to cut through something, I will build a sharp knife with a pointy end because it's sympathetic to the idea of penetrating and cutting. The blade itself incites to deeds of violence. It's Homer, right? The fact that the blade exists, the fact that the gun exists, incites to and towards its function. Understand it, and you will understand what you would call the mysteries, the deeper mysteries of magic over many years of observation and study, right? I was going to talk about portals and possession in this spaces, but I'm not going to. I'm going to talk about those later on in another spaces, because all of these topics take a certain oomph out of me. But primarily, um, and again, like I mentioned at the beginning of this spaces is for those who have been initiated into our group and our chat, who are wonderful people, mostly everyone I've interacted with, and I want to share with you and impart unto them the understanding, the basic fundamental understanding of how our world functions. What is magic? And most of magic has to do with, again, altering and readjusting the inner state of the human mind, on a mass level, on a mass media level, and on an internal personal level. You cannot help to not accept the world. The world is a consensus reality. It means that it forces acceptance. There's no other way of interacting with this world without acceptance and accepting it. But you also have the choice of participation. And most of the masses nowadays are locked into the trap of participation, involuntary participation, where they believe they are participating in one thing, where they believe they are interfacing and interacting with some sort of layer of reality or the theater, whatever, but in truth, they are trapped in interfacing with a world that is not archetypal by design. It's all man made. Football is a sport that is absolutely man made. Capitalism and as an ideology or an idea or political systems, they're made, these philosophies are made that are absolutely man made. They are not archetypal forms. Yet people are convinced, to the highest degree, that these are inherent philosophies and ideas that stem from nature itself. And they participate voluntarily or involuntarily, including myself, in the strengthening and further formation of these philosophies and ideologies. And who are the casters of the magical spells of these ideologies? It is those who defined them. It is those who interpreted them and reinterpreted them, brought them to the masses, and convinced the masses that these things are such. These things exist in such and such and such a way and manner. Now, if you wanted to build a perfect ideology and a perfect philosophy, you would study the lower base nature, Mother Nature, the ancient and primal Bible, and the first Bible that has ever existed. And then you would study man's higher nature, man's higher aspirations and ambitions and desires, his connection with the divine and sacred spark, his connection with the higher realms, his ability to interface with the higher realms. And you would create a hybridized variety of philosophies and a hybridized variation of ways of living that would be based on archetypal truths, not on someone's idea or someone's personal subjective logic or personal subjective idea on how a society should run and how it should be constructed and what law should be and how much power this or that thing should have and so on and so forth. um, Logic is not the answer to animalistic primal bestial living. Logic is not civilization. Logic is a box that you put these things into. It is what incites and what is sympathetic to uniformity, right? So, what you gain today is not fairness, because you cannot achieve fairness through the use of logic only, right? But you have achieved uniformity. You have achieved boundaries and laws and rule sets and so on and so forth. These are also spells, right? But they are long lost spells, so to speak. They're very potent spells that are maintained just by the status quo, the default state of living that many of us are in. Do you use money? Is money an archetypal construct that is found within the archetypal primal design of the world? Is it a primordial thing? Of course not. It is something, it is a concept that is subjectively interpreted by man, absolutely man made, yet we all participate because we are forced to accept its reality and participate in its reality. But never forget that participation is chosen. If you can be coerced to involuntarily participate in the rituals of others, then you give it validity and you give it approval. And also understand that if you create inner beauty and if you can facilitate space for your inner beauty to bleed into this world, it will, and it will take form and it will take shape. Again, this is why I always say all the man needs nowadays, with the times that are coming, is 100 friends, is 100 friendly voices who will share ideas with them and will manifest these ideas in whatever way or form or whatever shape they might take together as a collective. You need 100 friends, 100 friendly voices who share common thoughts and common ideas and so on and so forth. The To finish on a more positive note, one must under when we talk about magic, and again, I don't give away specific examples. I never do. I already gave the key to unlocking what it is and its effects and how you can use it and not use it and avoid those who misuse it. But you must understand that at some point, when we start not teaching, but like sharing higher forms of magic, let's say white sorcery, you wanted to call it, it will be the same thing as um, religious bliss, so to speak, right? It will not be something that's dogmatic, of course, but it will be the same thing as religious bliss. Because you will understand that miracles exist beyond logic, like we say. And because miracles exist beyond logic, logic is the framework through which a miracle is defined, right? If there's a 0.0000001% chance of a synchronicity happening in your life, and if you have had that proof given to you by the universe, through synchronicity, it has used the blockade and the boundary of logic to give you something that is almost so beyond logic that it's almost impossible. But why is it almost impossible and not fully impossible? Because you are a human being within a fractal three-dimensional world and you have the ability to choose. That's what the universe is teaching you. That's what your great God is teaching you because it loves you to the degree where it won't allow itself to give you 100% proof. You need to still choose it. Even if you've earned the proof of the existence of God and the meaning of life and so on and so forth, you need to choose it as your proof. That is why you're here. And once you understand that, you will also understand the religious bliss element of it. Because miracles don't happen when within the boundaries of logic. Miracles don't happen when you observe them because your brain, your ego mind, wherever it's active, it activates a block, a barrier. You're unable to perceive things in illogical ways because that's how the ego mind, the separated mind, the individualized mind survives the truth, the eventual and relentless truth that it is one with the whole of existence. You cannot kill a god, but you can make him forget that he was ever one. So understand that you are capable of creating beautiful things in this world. And because external and formulaic magic has decayed and regressed into something despicable and into something that does not serve the does not serve beauty and the satiation of the soul, right? It doesn't mean that it is necessarily a bad thing on its own as a concept, because you too can build beautiful things of the material that impress beautiful thoughts onto you and make your mind beautiful. And then if your mind is beautiful, you can, your spaceship can become completely destroyed, right? Your house can be completely rearranged and desecrated. But if the beauty lives within you, you will take it with you at all times. But because we are in this material realm, it's important to live and breathe the beauty that lives within you, because you are a portal to that beauty. You have a gift to give to this world, and if you are able to bring that into the material and create it into the material, it will make your soul lighter, so to speak, right? It will increase your soul. It will add to it. It will enhance it. It will um, make you more than you think yourself to be, right? You have to play these things out in the material realm as well. So it's not like the material realm is an evil, bad thing. No, no, my friends. That is a Saturnian concept or construct, I should say, right? The material world is a blessing. It is a realm with the half potential of a heavenly realm, of a heavenly state of existence. Our realm, the physical reality, the material reality, is always the exact precipice between the masculine and the feminine, the dark and light energies. It is the silver lining, it is the portal realm. It is the realm of portals that can access both of these realities, right? The highest and the lowest. We meet in the middle. And why do you meet in the middle? What is the function of a crossroads? The function of a crossroads is to choose. It is to symbolically show you and to give you, to inspire you to cast a choice. That's what you are here for in this world, partially, not the only function of this world, not the grandest meaning of life, of course, but functionally at the level of apprenticeship. That is why you're here. You are here at this crossroads, this dualistic, energetic, heavenly manifestation, to choose. So if you study the symbolic meanings of the world, right, and if you study what is regarded as magic, right, you will very promptly understand that you are the magic. You are the magical cane. You are the source of all magic, both ritualistic, formulaic. Your mental state, your consciousness is the primary tool for the imparting of thought forms into the material realm and allowing them to manifest or disallowing them to manifest. But the problem is the chaos becomes apparent and widespread when you understand that all of us are each sentient being is a center of the universe. Each sentient being is regarded by cosmic forces as the absolute center point of all that is. This is why you live your life in first person as an individualized being is even made possible. How then could life be made possible as a singular individual human being if the universe and the cosmos did not regard you as one of its uttermost center points for the existence of all things? But what happens when all sentient beings are regarded by the universe as the center point of all reality? Well, what happens is a lot of convincing by those who perhaps know these truths or have attained these truths through impure means. The convincing of others that somehow they matter less and others matter more, or these peoples matter less and other people matter more, and blah, 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 blah. Why our world it is the way it is today is because there's a contingent of people who have a very pristine understanding of these effects and what they achieve, and then there is a mass of people who do not understand the power of their own mind. They do not see themselves as magical. They do not see themselves as magic. They do not see themselves as the center point of all reality itself. They see themselves as a symptom of someone else's truth. And that is why largely our world is the way it is. But those with the highest degree of initiation, be it from living a life of debauchery and darkness, or be it from living a life of purity and innocence, the final lesson always is the same. But on the lower end, the final lesson stings. On the higher end, the higher lesson gives grants bliss. But the lesson is the same. So how can, if the lesson is the same, how can it sting so much on the lower end, and how can it be a blissful experience on the higher end? You might ask. Well, it's very simple. The final lesson is that all things, all things come from the same source. And all good that you've done to yourself, and all wrong you have done, that you know you have through the compass of your conscience, not by human law, not by human morals and ethics, not by societal standards and boundaries and laws, but through the compass of your conscience. All the bad things you have done unto yourself. You've inflicted unto yourself. And the eventual and inevitable acceptance of this truth can either bring you to heaven, or it can bring you into a hellish existence of self hatred and disgust, and an incredible innate desire to make right the damage you have caused in this world. This is why morality and faith and higher learning and goodness must be the prerequisite fundament of all learning. All mysticism, all magic, all esoteric truths must be preceded with the purification of the soul and body and mind. It must be. Power, when it is removed from these truths, will send you into a hellish state, because you do not understand the weight and value of that power, and the weight and value of the actions you partake in, voluntarily and involuntarily. That is why the fundament must be there before the truth is revealed. And these are very rare individuals in our world, because our world is at the precipice. It's a lower caste realm with the potential of higher being, but still it is a lower caste realm. In our realm, these are rare individuals who can be initiated into the mystical lessons of life, who can truly be initiated and finally advance into a higher being of existence outside of their egoistic and egoic minds. Whereas most people are still trapped within their egos, as we said in the past, right? Again, like I said, I'm going to speak about the portals and possession a little bit later, because those are like very in-depth topics. Even the magic and the sympathy topics are very in-depth, but there's only so much you can do in like a little rant monologue type of deal, right? These are conversations that one must have for an extended period of hours, for extended period of days, um, for someone to fully understand it and to be initiated into it. But because this is an inner circle type of space, and some people are already understanding of these concepts, I can allow myself to talk about them in passing like this, right? So in terms of like half truths and half info, and like um, um, sort of assuming that the context is already there, the contextual knowledge of these things is already there. Um, the A fitting ending for being given such information, right, is that you have to understand that you, as the magician's cane, right, have the ability to give focus and attention and your involuntary participation or voluntary participation to things that occur in this world, and that effect is what determines whether it manifests, whether it is empowered or not empowered. That is the only thing that decides it. what sways the quantum composition of a scenario, event, or narrative unfolding within a pocket um, of time and reality. That is what sways it. And you can choose. This is why I always try to inspire others to choose beauty and to do good and to do beauty and bring beauty into this world. You can't fight fire with fire. You can only make it obsolete, right? You can only make the things you do not desire in your domain, in your kingdom. And this world is your kingdom. Each of us is a king and queen of this kingdom. And whatever you do not desire to be the part of your domain, you can unattention it out of reality. But the moment you lend your attention and focus to it is the moment you agree to its empowerment, not to its existence. You cannot destroy it because we are each an equal creator. But you can empower it or disempower it. And I don't mean disempower it in the sense of advocate against it. I mean disempower it with the only source of agency you have given to you in this life, your own attention, the blessing of your time and your effort. If you build something that is beautiful, it makes everything else that is less beautiful obsolete. And then there is the philosophical, the paradoxical question of what is there in this world that is not beautiful? Well, that is the question you must ask yourself. That is the question you must understand because when you are of higher consciousness, for example, in comparison to the average mind, like we said, in your imaginative space, you have the ability to conceptualize more and more divine and sacred and abstract forms of beauty within your mind in comparison to the average person. So your understanding of beauty, aka your understanding of God, right, is closer to the objective image of God because you have worked to make your mind beautiful. You have worked to make your mind into a garden of bliss, right? So the world is your kaleidoscope. Look into it from your lens, from your filter. Support that which supports you. Build the things that you find beauty in, that you can channel beauty from these higher meditative realms that we talked about. And things that you don't necessarily like or you don't necessarily agree with, the things that do not align with your compass of conscience and intuition, starve them of attention, right? Do not fall into the trap of participating in someone else's grand theater because the only person who can power that ritual is you through your belief system, through your willingness to believe it. So think on that, my friends. I have to go and drink hot cocoa now and have a juicy little what is this, apple strudel or something like that. So um, much love to you all. If you want to support me, you can go on my Ko-fi page. You can donate however you want. I appreciate that. It gives me the ability to do less of other work in life and more of this. Um, so you can do that. You can buy my books if you already haven't. If you're interested in physiognomy, although the better part of those, the more philosophical ones and the spiritual ones, are on their way. Again, I don't have time to work on them much. Um, Much love to everyone in my group chat in the Kaleidoscope group. If you want to join in on the conversation, if you have any beautiful art you want to share with us, any sort of beautiful thing that you've created or know, join the Kaleidoscope group. It's in my channel, in my status. Just send a request. If you want to join the group chat, you can send me, so that you could, I don't know, send me a message and I'll add you to the group chat. So much love to everyone. Happy learning. Have a great time, and remember, you matter more than you know.